Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels. Now, we are going back today, as always, to the JRC, going over the little thing that was written by. Oh, let me grab his name. I'm sorry. I've been out in the sun today, so Um, Shane Nuremar, JD, Inhumane Beyond All Reason. So, we went through 3 pages the other day. All the things that he stated extremely true. So, we are going to continue to cover the rest of it. Now, before we get going, folks, as always, if you do want to read along or just simply want a copy of this, you will find it in the description box, along with the video that kicked off this entire gigantic series about in regards to the JRC and why I'm continuing to pursue those bastards. Also included is to shut Judge Rotenberg Center Down petition. If you haven't signed it already, please do. Now, folks, as always, a warning. If there are young children present, when we talk about the JRC, we do include vivid descriptions of, and sometimes the actual footage of of children and adults with disabilities being tortured. Footage coming from the 2012 case of the 2002 incident with Andre McCollins. So please wear your headphones. If I butcher any words or stumble over my words, please do forgive me, folks. So let's go ahead and get started where we left off yesterday morning. Both legal and parental support for the program has continued even after a slew of preventable deaths at the BRI during the 1980s, starting with that of 25-year-old Robert Cooper in 1980, who died with a bowel obstruction after BRI failed to provide him with medical treatment before his condition became fatal. The state neither found nor held the BRI responsible for his death. 5 years after that, the situation repeated itself when Vincent Militic, a student with a seizure disorder, asphyxiated after having a seizure while being restrained for making inappropriate sounds. Okay, think about that. Someone has seizure disorder. When someone is having a seizure, sounds come out. And you are really going to oh my god. I'm going to continue to tell you the rest of this. With his head in a helmet and forced between the knees of a staffer, plastic cuffs on his hands and feet keeping him in his chair. Think about that. Have you ever seen someone with having a grand mal seizure sticking a helmet on them when it's already difficult for them to breathe? Yeah. While his death led to OSC's attempt to close the BRI, and a later negligence lawsuit resulted in a judgment against the BRI and some of its doctors, the program was officially cleared of responsibility for Militek's death. Of course, it doesn't matter if we're disabled, right? Freaking pricks. The relevant authorities made the same call when it came to the death of Linda Cornelissen, a 19-year-old non-speaking woman with developmental disability in 1990. Cornelissen, whose mother later said she had no prior stomach problems, had been clutching her stomach in pain and refusing to eat while at BRI. The treatment staff thought that she was acting out and proceeded to treat her symptoms as a behavior problem. Oh my god, seriously? Over the course of 2 days leading up to her death from a perforated stomach ulcer, staff repeatedly used aversives, namely muscle squeezes, spatula spankings, pinches, and ammonia pills on her, including 57 such applications in just the 4 hours before she died. Oh my god. Oh my god. In an investigative report after the incident, the Department of MR concluded that what they had done to Cornelison at BRI had been inhumane beyond all reason and had violated the universal standards of human decency. Even with this damning language, and with a verdict for Cornelson's family in a negligence lawsuit, the state did not, in the end, hold BRI responsible for her death. In all, 6 students have died at the program, and in 5 of these cases, the most that it has had to face in terms of consequences has been civil lawsuits for money damages. The one exception to this impunity came in the form of the state of California's response to the death of 14-year-old Danny Oswald, a student with intellectual disabilities, while he was mechanically restrained to his bed, face down, for over an hour at the BRI's West Coast facility. Even though the coroner had listed Oswald's death as somehow being a direct result of his intellectual disabilities and congenital malformations of the brain. How do you figure? Really? He's strapped down, face down on the bed, and somehow it's his fault? Really? The Department of Social Services pursued an investigation and into the BRI's program as a whole. Among other things, the investigation revealed that the BRI had used adversives excessively and unnecessarily, such as on a deaf child for failing to obey verbal commands. Oh my God. Had deliberately concealed a student's bruises caused by the use of adversives from doctors and state agencies, had prompted students to act aggressively for the purpose of punishing them or demonstrating that they were aggressive as a part of what it called behavioral rehearsal lessons. Jesus Christ. And had retaliated against the students whose family members questioned the treatment program or threatened to make complaints. BRI of California, such as it was, did not survive the resulting lawsuit and entered into a settlement agreement with the state in 1982, under which it agreed to stop using adversives and to ban Matthew Israel from involvement in its operations. However, the program continues to operate in California under the name of Tobin World and is run by Israel's wife, Judy Weber. Oh my God. Meanwhile, the BRI's East Coast facility continued to use the same methods it had since it had opened. In fact, the same ones that the California branch had been banned from using, despite the aforementioned 2 attempts by the state of Massachusetts to shut it down. Following its first victory, it's not only changed its name to the Judge Rotenberg Center, both in commemoration of the Chief Justice of the Probate Court after his death and as a warning to anyone who would try to close or interfere with the program, and moved all of its facilities to Massachusetts. But it also introduced the use of electric shock as an aversive. For a couple of years, it had a relatively weak device called Self-Injurious Behavior Inhibition System, with a shock lasting a tenth of a second that reportedly felt like snapping a rubber band against one's skin. However, because of the extent to which the program used it on its students, including one instance in which an autistic student named Brandon Sanchez was shocked 5,000 times in a single day, it began to lose its effect as students inured to it over a period of months and years. When its representatives approached the developers of the SIBIS to request that they make a stronger device, the developers refused. Thank God. Glad somebody has a conscience. As a result, the program designed and began to manufacture its own device, which it called the Graduated Electronic Decalator, the GED. The GED shock was designed to be, and is, far more painful than that of the SIBIS, 3 times as powerful, in fact, with shocks lasting for a full 2 seconds. The device consists of a battery pack and 5 electrodes, 2 attached to the student's arms, 2 attached to their legs, and 1 on their stomachs, and it is activated by a student-specific remote control carried by the JRC staff. JRC has described the level of pain inflicted by the GED as being no worse than a bee sting. Students, former staff members, and visitors to the program who tried the GED on themselves have disagreed strongly with this assessment. One JRC survivor compared the feeling to that of being attacked by a horde of wasps, Investigators and former staff members report the GED regularly caused burns, which are bad enough that it became medically necessary to stop shocking the students for a number of weeks. Still, students became inured to the pain caused by the GED through repeated use in the same way they had to the SIBIS shocks. Thus, only a couple of years later, the JRC designed and began to use a more powerful device, the GED-4, which was 3 times as powerful as the original GED. Additionally, they eventually designed and began to use other shock devices, such as the GED cushion, that would shock a student who got out or fell out of their chair without a staff permission. Jesus Christ. By means of these devices, electric shock became a primary adversive used at JRC, replacing the use of techniques such as spatula spanks, pinches, muscle squeezes, and ammonia pellets that Matthew Israel thought too risky for staff and supposedly students. Oh, you afraid you're gonna look bad? This looks worse! Even with the introduction and widespread use of the GED, JRC's opponents in the Massachusetts legislature and the disability advocacy community were and have been consistently unable to get any legislation passed that would ban it and other adversives. Like in the lawsuits between the JRC and the state, parents and guardians of the JRC students played a significant role in ensuring the defeat of such measures. God, what the hell is wrong with these people? They think your children are animals. Really? That's the guy you want to send your kids to. Year after year, legislators such as Senator Brian Joyce from Canton would file anti-adversive bills, only to have parents show up at the hearings on the issue to tell how the electric shock and other adversives had saved their children's lives. These people are insane! Who would rather live being treated like an animal? Animals don't deserve this kind of treatment, let alone human beings. Oh, but we're disabled because we deserve it. We dare to exist and breathe the same air as you, right? How dare we breathe? In some cases, JRC students themselves would be brought to testify, wearing the GED while they told the legislator how it and other adversives had saved or improved their lives. While wearing them. Think about it. While wearing them. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? That means their testimony means jack shit. I mean, what would happen if they said actually, this is torture. This is what's really going on. Somebody in the audience could push a button, couldn't they? The JRC has also brought Brandon Sanchez, the same autistic who was shocked 5,000 times in a single day, and whose uncle Jeffrey Sanchez is a state representative, to hearings to show people the kind of behaviors in students it attempts to treat. As a result of this, Representative Sanchez has been a strong and, in fact, formidable opponent of efforts to pass laws banning the use of adversives. Yeah, torture my nephew. You sick son of a bitch. They're animals. They're animals. They have to be treated this way. What the hell is wrong with these people? It wasn't until 2006 that the JRC and its use of adversives faced significant public outcry and governmental opposition again. This began with a lawsuit filed by Evelyn Nicholson on behalf of New York on the behalf of her son Antoine, both against the JRC and against his local school district in his home of New York for placing him at the facility over its misuse of the GED. In one instance, in refusing to get ready for bed when he was told to. In one instance in particular, the JRC staff told Antoine that they were going to hang him up like Jesus Christ for refusing to get ready for bed when he was told to, and proceeded to shock him when he was in the shower. Oh my God. Evelyn decided to take action, removing Antoine from the program and eventually filing the lawsuit, after which Antoine called her from JRC and told her that he no longer believed that she loved him for letting the JRC hurt him so badly. While the Nicholson's lawsuit was eventually dismissed on the grounds that Evelyn had initially given consent for the JRC to electrically shock Antoine, in the meantime, the New York State Education Department responded to the family's allegations by conducting an investigation. After making two site visits to JRC, one announced and one unannounced, the investigators released a report that mirrored the California Department of Social Services 1982 complaint in the extent to which the adverses were used and in fact abused. In addition to its often quoted reference to students being shocked for nagging, swearing, and failing to maintain a neat appearance, it discussed the JRC's punitive use of the long term mechanical restraint and food deprivation. It reported that the JRC was using that same so called behavior rehearsal lessons that it had more than 20 years before. On top of this, the report contained highly disturbing findings about how these methods were used and, in fact, how the program was run, such as how the staff would purposely set students up by administering unfair punishments and would then further punish those students who made use of the school's official complaint process in protest. The investigators expressed some serious concern not only for the students' mental health and that some of the students showed signs of post traumatic stress disorder and depression, but also for their physical safety, writing that the JRC's food deprivation programs put students at risk of malnutrition and that none of its shock devices were approved by the Food and Drug Administration, as we've gone over before. As a result of these findings, New York passed the emergency regulations that banned its students from being sent to any program, in or out of state, that used adversives. However, once again, parents came to the JRC's defense, suing the state education department, counterintuitively, on the basis of disability and other civil rights statutes. Once again, they were victorious, with a trial court preventing the enforcement of the regulations. Although the lawsuit has continued through a series of appeals, through which most of the parents' claims have been dismissed, New York continues to send students to the JRC and fund their placement there. The following year, an incident at the JRC further strengthened the opposition to its methods and continued existence. In one of the JRC's group homes, staff woke two students up in the middle of the night by shocking them and proceeded to shock them a combined total of more than 100 times, with one of the boys receiving 77 shocks on the order of a prank caller. Himself recently an escaped JRC student who was posing as a senior member of staff. While the people who admitted the administered shocks were confused as to why the caller was ordering the shocks in the absence of any target behaviors, they followed these orders unquestioningly, even as the students offered up no resistance and in fact tried to make it clear that they were not doing anything wrong. In spite of the JRC initially dismissing the students' complaints of pain from having been repeatedly shocked, one of the students was eventually hospitalized for having first-degree burns. In the aftermath of this incident, the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care made an official finding that the two students had been abused and neglected, and that the staff members responsible for this had received improper training in the use of the GED. They ordered the JRC to keep the video footage of the incident on file for them to use as needed. But in the month following the event, Matthew Israel had the footage destroyed, later claiming to have thought that the investigating agencies no longer needed it. Bullshit, you were covering your ass, you sick son of a bitch. So, folks, you've heard some of this before in one of my earlier videos when I've gone over these people's history. But now you're getting even more of a bird's eye window into it. This is the place I am fighting tooth and nail to close down. They torture us. They treat us like animals. They treat us even as less than animals. And that's how they see us. They don't see us as human beings. They don't see us as human beings. They think we deserve this type of treatment. That somehow this is going to modify our behavior to, I don't even know what Matthew Israel was trying to get from us. I just know it's freaking disgusting and horrifying. So, I'm going to go ahead and close out for this afternoon. As always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do appreciate you for your time. Now, we don't get that very many views on this channel. The few that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this afternoon. And as always, folks, we here at Smelling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.